Morning and welcome, and glad you could join us today. Yeah, if I seem up close, then you agree with Kim. I'm up too close. But I hope you enjoy what we're about to do here today as we look at life on a mountain. I don't know about you all, but life on a mountain doesn't sound like an easy life to me. I always think of hermits and people like that as living on the mountains, right? Hopefully most of you have seen Christmas Eve, and we talked about the Grinch. Yeah, he lived at the top of the mountain, didn't he, in a cave? That's the kind of people I think of when I think of life on a mountain. Now we're going somewhere new, obviously, in our sermon for today. We're going up to the mountaintops, and if you see the picture up on the screen, that is purposefully not taken from a valley. That is purposefully a mountain amongst mountains. That's usually how mountains work. I'm getting moved. Why am I getting moved?
I was going to try and get the mountains.
Oh, no. You don't need to do that. So have you ever spent much time in the mountains? Been out to maybe West Virginia? I can remember driving through West Virginia and even driving right through the mountains, right? How about maybe Alaska? Those are some amazing mountains up there, Mount McKinley. The Alps in Europe, the Andes in South America? No, me neither. I've never been there. How about Colorado? See, in the summer when I was 11, my family went to visit my mom's cousin and his wife, and they lived in Lakewood, Colorado, which is a suburb on the west side of Denver. And it's right at the foothills of the mountains, because literally you could just drive a little bit ways west and everything started going up. And it was kind of a neat thing. And literally one day they took us up to Rocky Mountain National Park. They took us to Estes Park. And so I was right there, and they went not the usual way. We came home the usual way. You come down through Boulder and then back into Denver. No, we went way west and made our way back there on a bunch of dirt roads, to say the least. I saw a bunch of hippies. It was 1972 after all, in huge groups of people. What they were doing, or I don't know. My dad probably had something nasty to say about it, right? Hey, it was those days, wasn't it? And so, but we also saw mountain brooks. We saw snowy peaks in July. Yeah, they were there. We saw the dirt roads that circled their way up actually switchback after switchback after switchback up the hills on these dirt roads with no guardrails. No guardrails in sight. Dad, be careful, please. Because I don't know why, but I'm the one who seemed to be sitting on the outside the most as we went up. And you look over and you go, this doesn't look good. And I've been to Windsor lots of times in my life. I never liked being on the Ambassador Bridge either. So I don't know why I always like the tunnels better, but that's just me. I'm weird, I know. Mountains are amazing, right? And there's something that's just, I don't know, we're drawn to their grandeur, their majesty, their what do we think at 4th of July? Their purple mountain majesty, right? And yet mountains don't exist just to be seen, do they? There's something you have to experience in so many ways, to hike, to climb, to struggle, to persevere your way to the top. The picture on the screen today comes from a place where they know a little bit about mountains. No, it's not K2 or Everest, but that is Nepal. And that is way up there, from what I read. Just a little bit shorter than those other two. All in kind of the same kind of mountain range kind of thing there in Tibet. And it's just amazing to look at the pictures and to realize. But you know what it says to me is, you got to be gutsy to climb that. That just looks a little scary to me. And not only scary because of how steep it might be, or how the snow can just all of a sudden give out on you. It's cold. Now, we all know what cold is here, right? Cold is, well, it can be bitter. I've been to Houghton for Winter Carnival. I know what 35 minus feels like. It just feels like pain. That's what I remember. It hurt to be outside at minus 35. Minus 35 would be nothing for them. Yeah. No, thank you. But there's, seeing these amazing pictures really kind of can be inspirational, can it? Now, it doesn't inspire me to put on crampons and buy a pick and start climbing, Now, it doesn't inspire me that much, but it is amazing to see. Now, mountains many times are dangerous places. That particular one up there looks very dangerous, whether that's from severe cold, winds, rocky terrain, or even wildlife, because most of the world's mountains are in that rugged backcountry and remote and unforgiving. After all, most of the mountains in the world don't have paved roads that go up them, right? Yeah, Pikes Peak, I guess, does, but they're few and far between like that. So most of the roads then are what? They're left for the fertile valleys, aren't they? Where people live, where they work, all those kind of things. And yes, next week we're going to be looking at life in the valley. So that's just to lead you forward there a little bit. Now, there are some exceptions to mountains. Actually, in Great Britain's history, in England, they had their ridgeline paths that they walked because of their they're much farther north, closer to the Arctic than we are, and so their tree line is very low. And what would happen is when they get on these high ridges, there would be no trees. And it would be easier to walk in, and it would be safer. Places like that in Scotland too, where they have lots of places with no trees. But what would happen is you could walk safely on the ridge lines, but down in the valleys is where the bears and the wolves lived. Yeah, and it could be a little bit dangerous. Oh, and the highwaymen too. Yeah, you want to watch out for those too. But obviously this sermon isn't about staying away from mountains because they can be dangerous. Instead, we're going to look at a few examples of mountains in the Bible and see what mountains meant to the Jewish people, and especially to God. So we're going to begin with a couple of verses that I have memorized, but we're going to look at them in a different translation. For the entire of this sermon, we're going to be using Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, The Message. So Mike, can you read Psalm 121, verses 1 to 2?
I look up to the mountains. Does my strength come from the mountains? No, my strength comes from God, who made heaven and earth and mountains.
Thank you, Mike. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but looking at mountains is a worldwide obsession. People will travel all over the globe just to see things, right? Obviously, one of those things could be the Grand Canyon or the Taj Mahal or the Rocky Mountains or someplace else, right? Now, I don't know about you, but we have an LG TV like these LG TVs are. And do you know what happens when you turn your LG TV on and it just doesn't have any source? It flips through these pictures. And there are some amazing pictures that I think come from Switzerland, because you get the lake and you get the mountains, and it's just neat to see how they just go up and up and up. They're amazing to look at. But we are struck most by that idea of scenic beauty, the ruggedness, the permanency, which I'm glad I actually pronounced that correctly, because I was going to have to ask you all how to pronounce permanency. Or really the strength that they represent to us. The Bible over and over again uses the idea of mountains as a strength, amazingly enough. And obviously the mountains are the source of help that we're looking at here in Psalm 121. Well, sort of. You see, first off, we kind of need to explore why the author of this psalm is looking at the mountains in the first place. What's the problem that he's having in life? What's going on here? Why is he looking at the mountains? Why does he need help? Right? We aren't really told what kind of problem he's having or what or who could help him, but we do see the question, right? Does my strength come from the mountains? It might. Maybe if there was a military garrison up there or something like that, and he's having a problem with bandits or something else, yeah, that might help to have them come down and defend you. Or it could be a place of refuge, a place to run to in times of trouble. You could see the idea that perhaps the mountain could be a safe place, but that's not really what the psalmist realizes. He sees God as the source of his strength. And he proves God's strength through creation. The creation of the universe, the creation of the planets and the stars, and the earth that he resides upon. And yes, because God also created the mountain, that he happens to be gazing up at. He realized that the mountain can't help him, but God can help him. God can help him. So the question then becomes, as he used creation, is who's greater, the creator or the creation? Would you believe it or not, that's not as easy a question as you might think. And do you know what I went to when I began to think about that? I went to the Mona Lisa. Who's greater, Leonardo da Vinci or the Mona Lisa? Leonardo da Vinci was an amazing man. He basically had drawings for a helicopter back, over 500 years ago, right? Amazing guy. He did all kinds of things. He was great, but he lived, he died, he's gone. The Mona Lisa is over 500 years old. And 8 million people a year go to the Louvre to see it. 8 million people a year. Well, okay, not 8 million people over every one of those 500 years since he painted it. It hasn't been there that long. But you get the point. You could say that the Mona Lisa has made more of a difference in people's lives than Leonardo has. So it's possible. It's possible. So which is greater? Leonardo or his painting? Yes, the creator is greater. This is true for paintings and for mountains alike. Psalm 121 goes on to, from what I read, to speak about God's greatness, right? God neither sleeps nor slumbers, but you can trust him in any time of the day. He's going to be there for you. But then sometimes we see an interesting thing, that God has an affinity for mountains too. Did you know that? I didn't even realize it until I started looking at it, how much he does. So we're going to move on to a couple of well-known verses from the book of Exodus. Yeah, just hang with me here. We're going to look at one that comes right towards the beginning and one that comes towards the end, over about an 8-chapter span. Yeah, I know, I understand. So Mike, can you read for us Exodus 3, verses 1 to 5?
Moses was shepherding the flock of Jethro. His father-in-law, the priest of Midian, had led the flock to the west end of the wilderness and came to the mountains of God, Horeb. The angel of God appeared to him in flames of fire blazing out of the middle of a bush. The bush was blazing away, but it didn't burn up. Moses said, "What's going on here? I can't believe this. Amazing. Why doesn't the bush burn up?" God said that he had stopped to look. God called to him from out of the bush, "Moses, Moses," he said. "Yes, I'm right here," God said. "Don't come any closer. Remove your sandals from your feet. You're standing on holy ground."
Now, obviously, I've used this verse before, and I've talked all about the burning bush and all those different things. So we're not quite going there today. So here we have Moses and a flock of sheep, and they're traveling up the side of Mount Horeb. And what are they looking for? They're looking for something for the sheep to eat. I mean, that's just what life was like. If you left sheep in one area, they'd just eat all that grass and starve and die. You have to keep them moving. So anybody know much about Mount Horeb? Right? Well, it was a mountain with two sides to it, basically. And in a lot of ways, it had two peaks. One side was known as Horeb. The other side was known as Mount Sinai. We're going to be looking at that one later on, though. But you get the idea. It's on the Sinai Peninsula that sits between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And if you're on the Saudi Arabia side, you go north, you'll eventually come to Jerusalem. So this Sinai Peninsula. And it was the place, that area is the wilderness that the Jews wandered in for years, literally. And I always think of it as a desert. I don't know if you do that, but Sinai is not really a desert. It's more like a wasteland with little vegetation, but what little vegetation there is, well, the sheep can eat there for a day and then move on to someplace else, or half a day and have to keep on moving. That's literally what it's like. But look at what it talked about, that this was a place of holy ground. Why would this particular mountain be holy? Now, the easy answer is because God chose it to be holy, right? He chose to be present at that place. And really, that's all we can say about it. We can't say that out of everything God created, he created this one place to be holy. And I'm not really so sure if you were to go there today. By the way, they really aren't sure where Mount Horeb is. They haven't really found it per se. But the idea is that it's not necessarily still holy, but it was the place where the Jewish people would come through as they went on their 40-year wander. And this would be the place where God would meet them. God would meet Moses here first. Yeah, he would meet Moses again, but we got to wait for that. See, God had this way of choosing mountains as a place to reveal himself. Jerusalem's highest point is known as Mount Zion. You've probably heard that a few times. But what you may not know is that's where Abraham went to sacrifice his son Isaac. That's where God sent him to go, to that particular mountain, Mount Moriah, not known as that anymore, obviously. But obviously mountains just seem to be important. God always seems to choose high places. Even Jesus chose to go up to the mountains to pray to his Father, to commune with God. So is that what Moses is doing on Mount Horeb? Is he communing with God? No, he's receiving his marching orders. He's being told that it's time to lead the people of God out of Egypt, out of slavery, and towards the promised land that God has reserved for them. Right? And so literally, Moses is here having his life changed. What's Moses' life been? Well, he lived in Egypt for 40 years. He killed an Egyptian. The Pharaoh wanted to kill him. He left. He spent 40 years near Mount Horeb raising flocks and a family. He's had these two sections of 40 years in his life, and God says, guess what? I got a new 40 for you. Yeah, you're going to go bring my people home, but then you're going to spend 40 years in the desert. And then when you get in sight of the promised land, that's where you will die. Amazing life in so many ways. Now, obviously, we can talk about the burning bush a little bit, or Jethro being a priest of Midian, or any number of things. But it's important to realize why Moses met God that day. Because he climbed a mountain to feed some sheep. A gentle hill. Maybe he was just on the foothills, wherever it might have been. No, it was so he could experience God one-on-one and to gain a new flock, right? The whole tribe of Israel, those who were children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so that he could be the leader of the people, and so he could experience what it's like to be led by God. Well, let's continue looking at Moses' mountaintop experiences with God, and this time on the other side of the mountain. And after a few years have passed, let's put it that way. So, Mike, I've got Exodus 24 to 31. Can you read every verse in there? Okay, let's not do every verse. How about just a couple of verses?
Then Moses climbed the mountain. The cloud covered the mountain. The glory of God settled over Mount Sinai. The cloud covered it for 6 days. On the seventh day he called out the cloud to Moses. In the view of the Israelites below, the glory of God looked like a raging fire at the top of the mountain. Moses entered the middle of the cloud and climbed the mountain. Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. When he, God, finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses 2 tablets of testimony, slabs of stone written with the finger of God. All
right. So there were a couple of dots in there you might have noticed. That's because Moses goes up on the mountain in Exodus 24. He comes down from the mountain in Exodus 31. Yeah, we got a lot of space in between there that we can't possibly cover, right? So we kind of had to keep it a little short. So once again, Moses is climbing the mountain. The situation's a little different here, partially because of the cloud and what looked like fire at the top. Now, many times mountains are covered in clouds, right? The idea is if you're above the cloud line, the clouds will come in and it will seem like fog. That's all it seems like. But obviously it's a cloud. Well, I think this is a little different kind of cloud. because present within this cloud is fire, or what looks like fire ranging on the top of the mountain. You know, there are many people who think they know where Mount Sinai is, and there's pictures of it, and the top of it is black. Perhaps that explains it, perhaps not. We're not really certain. But we do know what's going on in there. That Moses is doing what? He's going to meet God again, isn't he? He's going to meet God. As we begin to wonder, is, you know, what's going on? The cloud and the fire? Well, that's telling everybody, guess what? God's here. God's present in this place. And so now Moses' presence was requested by God. So up he went. Now, as we began thinking about these kind of things, you know, the idea, one of the interesting things is that Moses was up there for 40 days and 40 nights. And what's he doing? God is teaching him the law that he has to give to the people. 40 days and 40 nights of God teaching, preaching to him. And you guys complain about 20 minutes is too hard to stay awake for, huh? Come on, 40 days and 40 nights continuous. Yeah, I know. I'd be falling asleep too. So we see this now. At the end of the time in the mountain, Moses is given some things to come back to his flock with, right? First, we know he had a nice tan by being in the presence of God. Well, actually, a little bit more than a tan. His face reflected the glory of God. So much so the people told him they needed to put on a veil so it would cover the glory. I don't know if the veil looked like this or not, but I started wondering. Blue, yeah, no, okay, maybe not. So Moses also brought down the commandments written on 2 stone tablets by the fingerprint of God. But of course, he would need to get a replacement set, because he came down and he saw the people were worshiping this golden calf they created. Yeah, he smashed them on the ground. So he had to go back to God and get another set of those. Right? So literally, Moses was up on that mountain, and God was really speaking to him. But why did Moses go up there? He went up there to experiencing God. And I'm sure that was part of that. After all, he could have been taught by God while sitting in his tent for 40 days and 40 nights. God didn't need him in that present place for him to teach him. God had been speaking to him for years at this time and leading him and giving him all he needs. But apparently I'm thinking Moses needed that time. Moses needed it. We always think of Moses as this great person of faith. But really, when you read the story, you begin to realize he wasn't necessarily. But it was building in him all the time. From when he first began until he finally, went to be with God. That faith was building in him in a powerful way. Have you ever had a mountaintop experience with God? Where you experience an amazing closeness, you feel like God is really communicating to you and that you are really present with him. It can have a powerful impact on your life. I've had several mountaintop experiences in my Christian life. But what I've discovered as I look back at them is they weren't just for me. They weren't just for me. It wasn't just a matter of giving me, wow, that was cool. I like that. I'd do that again any day. No. There's so much more in it. God did not bring Moses to the mountain so that Moses could be closer to God, but so that he could be a better leader for these people. That was what it was all about. That's why Moses was there. And some of those mountaintops I've experienced, they tend to grow faith within me. But they also led me to reach out to people and tell them about what God communicated to me. Sometimes on the mountaintop, God was telling me how to be a better husband. Other times I was being like Moses, being called to lead a flock, as I strive to do in this place and to others. But as great as a mountaintop experience can be in our life, the most important thing is that we walk back down to regular life. And that we hold on to what God reveals to us in that moment. We never want to waste it. We want it to allow we want it to bring change into who we are and into our life, and to permanently change us from what we were before we walked up the mountain. So we have to always hold on to the truth that is revealed to us there. Now, I only have one more verse for you, and it fits so well with what I'm talking about. It's from Matthew 17, verse 20. Mike, I'm sorry, I forgot to invite you up.
The simple truth is that if you had a mere kernel of faith, a poppy seed, say, you would tell this mountain, move, and it would move. There is nothing you wouldn't be able to tackle.
Okay. As I said earlier, being up on the mountain is a time for God to build our faith. But the things like from this verse that I like, the thing I like most from this verse is the poppy seed. See, normally, yeah, this isn't a translation, it's a paraphrase, trying to put it into normal everyday words. And it's like, we never see mustard seeds. Anybody here ever seen a mustard seed? I saw a pastor had a little vial like you might have for anointing oil, and inside he had some mustard seeds, and he poured them out in my hand. I got to see that they're absolutely tiny. But I remember poppy seeds. You see, I grew up in Detroit here, and that means I had real bagels. Real bagels. I'm not talking about today. I'm talking like when I was a kid. My junior high actually had a window where you could buy milkshakes and bagels. It was the best eating I'd ever done in school, to say the least, okay? Didn't get milkshakes or bagels in high school too much. Ugh. Yeah, but so I've seen lots and lots of poppy seeds. Why they were on the bagels in the first place, I don't know. All they were good for is they'd get stuck in your teeth and somebody pointed out and you'd wind up being embarrassed. But it was junior high and you were going to be embarrassed anyhow about something, right? Yeah, that's what junior high is good for. It's just embarrassing you all the time as your voice cracks, or for the guys, or something else. There's always something there. But I love the bagels and still do. I just don't get them with poppy seeds anymore. I don't think they really mean anything to the bagel. I don't need them like that. So, but if we go to Traverse City, we're more than likely going to Big Apple Bagel. So yeah, those are good too, and no poppy seeds. But let's get back to the word Jesus spoke from the disciples, because that's really what's important. First off, he's not, I gotta say this, first off, he's not advocating mountain moving, okay? You don't have to move a mountain, all right? That's not really what he's talking about. The verse is spoken after Jesus has come down from a mountain. It's called, in the Bible, the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus goes up there with Peter, John, and James, his like inside group in the bit larger group, and there he is transfigured. He gets the glory that he had before Christmas when he was born. And then standing next to him is Elijah and Moses, and they're in their glory. They're reflecting God's glory as well in that moment. Meanwhile, the rest of the disciples made a golden calf. No, sorry, wrong story. No. They were down there, and they had this man who brought their son to them for them to heal him. And guess what? They couldn't do it. So Jesus comes down the mountain, and that's what he's faced with, is something that his disciples weren't able to do. So first thing he does is he rebukes his disciples. He casts out the demon that the child had, and then he healed the boy. And then the disciples wanted to know why they couldn't heal the boy. I mean, he'd given them amazing power to be able to do things like this, and they were no different than they were before they met Jesus. They were just regular, ordinary guys. And this is what Jesus said. It was because of their lack of faith that they could not heal him. See, because with faith, nothing is impossible, because faith relies not on ourselves, but on the power of God. Perhaps if those disciples had been up on the mountain with Jesus, they would have had their faith built in that moment when they saw him changed into the glory of God. Maybe then they would have had the faith necessary to do what they needed to do. See, those mountaintop experiences build faith within us, as I'm sure they did for Peter and James and John. But do we literally have to climb a mountain to meet God? Of course not. See, God doesn't live strictly on the mountaintops. There is no more place that is holy ground. Take your shoes off, because now guess what? You are holy ground. For God lives with you, in you. Right? And we can't leave ourselves and go somewhere else and meet God because He's within us. We just need to allow Him to be present with us, to speak to us in that still small voice, and we need to listen. And to do that, we need to be available to Him. We need to be available to Him. We need to be willing to seek Him, and with our hearts, not just with feet climbing upwards. Right? And then it means we need to share what we learn. Whether that's a mountaintop experience that's fresh in our minds, or that's something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. Because it's when we speak it out, it's when we tell other people about what God did in our life, that they began going, I want that same God in my life. I want Him to do that kind of thing for me. We need to be willing to testify to the truth, and to do everything we can to hold on to the faith that God builds on us through the amazing experiences. We may never be able to move a mountain, but we need to allow God to move us. And to always remember that our strength comes from God, who made heaven and earth and mountains. Let's pray. Almighty God, we thank you. We thank you for those moments in our lives when we achieve an extra measure of closeness to you. Whether that's up on a pristine mountainside, or it's down in the valley, or in our bed, or wherever it might be. Help us, oh God, to have those moments that can build our faith. But help us, Lord, not to just hold on to it as a neat experience, but to realize it's not just for us. It's a matter where we can share with others about what they can hear, about what God has done and wants to do for them. Help us, Lord, to be willing to use what we have. What little thing we are given by you, O God, so that others can find you as well. Help us, Lord, to remember